Guys, let's start with a very interesting Reddit story form. Gwen BD94. Ordered to do maintenance on a grill without the right equipment, grill was broken trying anyways. Another fun story about my favourite supervisor from when I was in the Navy. A little bit of backstory to help explain some of the later facts. In the military, every piece of equipment gets preventative maintenance done on it to maintain it in good working condition. In the Navy, we have a very well laid out maintenance system with step-by-step instructions on how to do every bit of maintenance, with instructions so simple a monkey could do it. Part of these maintenance procedures lists required tools, parts, materials, and test equipment, and they are also extremely specific, detailing the length requirement of your screwdrivers, the brand of your gauges, etc. The management of this system the Navy uses is called the Maintenance and Material Management System, 3M, or Planned Maintenance System, PMS. As an electrician, we owned all electrical distribution equipment on board, and for jobs without an electrical training background, we also owned the actual equipment. So the electronics technicians, with electrical training, could maintain their own electrical equipment. But the cooks, culinary specialists, without an electrical background, relied on us to maintain their equipment for them. Now, if you've ever used a commercial flat-top grill, shot or griddle before, you know you set it to a specific temperature you want the cooktop heated to, and not a 09 dial like your stove at home. Part of maintaining the griddle was checking the calibration of this temperature setting once every year or two. I forget how often this check was, but it wasn't a frequent check. Relatively early on when I got on board the ship, young EMFN, junior electrician, Gwen BD94, was assigned to do this maintenance check, so I gathered all of my tools, parts, materials, etc. In doing so, I couldn't find the proper temperature sensor for our calibrated temperature gauge. We had the round-tip ambient temperature probe for use in the ovens, but not the flat-tip surface temperature probe for use on a griddle. I asked a different supervisor to my favourite supervisor for help, and he couldn't find it either, so we ordered a new one, and he said he'd take care of the paperwork for the maintenance check. Being new and unfamiliar with the system, I let it go, and never questioned when the maintenance check disappeared from the maintenance list the next week, meaning someone accomplished it, hint nudge nudge, and all was good. The next time this maintenance check came up due, we were on deployment, and it was again assigned to me. By this time, we had a new supervisor, and I was now EM3, slightly less junior electrician, Gwen BD94. A bit more knowledgeable. I looked where we kept all our calibrated equipment and couldn't find the flat-top temperature probe I knew it needed, so I asked my supervisor. He found we had one on order, but didn't know that we had one in the shop, and told me to figure it out. Knowing that was an unlawful order and would amount to lying about the check and could bite me in the ass later, I said I wouldn't do the maintenance without the right equipment, and since he couldn't lawfully order me to, we started putting a note on the check that the tools were on order and delaying it. This went on for about 2 to 3 months until the check was about to go red, move out of periodicity, and cause negative numbers on out maintenance reports. And I was again ordered to figure it out, or I'd be written up. I refused and raised the same issue to my boss's boss, and we tore the shop apart trying to find the right equipment but couldn't find it, so he told me not to worry about it. Later that week, while I was on watch as a roving watchstander, allowed to walk around the ship and even required to, after dinner one evening, I saw a newer, more junior electrician, let's call him EMFA Timmy, even more junior than I initially was electrician, in the galley kitchen working on the griddle. I took a step into the galley and asked him what he was doing, and lo and behold, he was doing the maintenance check. I asked him what temperature probe he was using, and he showed me the one for the oven. I explained to him the issue and told him if he signed the maintenance check, it would be gun decking, lying on official paperwork, and he could get in trouble, but let him make his own decisions as an adult. He decided to continue doing the check. I giggled and continued on with my watch. After my watch, it was nearly 10 p.m, so I went to bed for the night. About an hour later, I got woken up, being told my supervisor needed me in the galley. I signed, figuring it was about the check, and I was going to get that earlier threatened write-up. After getting dressed and making it to the galley, the entire electrical shop was in the galley troubleshooting the griddle. You see, EMFA Timmy got to the step in the PMS where it said to use a screwdriver to adjust a dial until the thermometer read the same temperature indicated by the set temperature. When he measured it, it was off by about 150 degrees, so he kept turning up the heat. Eventually, it was hot enough to melt the griddle's built-in overtemp protection device, instantly shutting the stovetop off. Turns out, he did need that temperature probe. I was tasked with helping come up with a solution to fix it, because the griddle was a critical piece of equipment for the cooks, and we had no replacement parts to fix it. I asked EMFer Timmy if he ever finished the last steps of the maintenance card, turning the grill off, putting it back together, reporting completion of the PMS. He told me he hadn't. I turned to my boss and said since the maintenance check I explicitly advised against doing without the proper tools was still ongoing, and I was informed I could do the maintenance or be written up, I'd stick with my original decision and refuse to do the maintenance. He could write me up in the morning during working hours, but in the meantime, I was going back to bed. Have a nice night. In the morning, I did indeed get written up, but for the insubordination, not for refusing the maintenance check, while my boss's boss looked on with the biggest shit-eating grin at me for holding my ground, and my supervisor was pissed at me. Turns out I was right and we couldn't do that maintenance check without the right equipment. This remains one of my write-ups I am least ashamed to have ever gotten, and I'd take it again in a heartbeat to give a giant "I told you so" middle finger to idiot middle managers. I later found an electronic record of the counselling chit my supervisor got for tasks people with doing maintenance without the proper equipment, because I laid out that this was a known issue, we didn't have the right probe for years, and threw his ass deep under the bus. Hated the guy. We got the right probe in about 6 months later. TLDR. I got told to do a job I couldn't do or get written up. I refused. Someone dumber got roped into doing it. Stuff broke. I got told to help fix it. I said I already accepted being written up for opting out of this experience and took the write-up. Instead of malicious compliance, it was more of a refusal to compliance. Whatever. It was perfect. OP refusal to comply unlawful orders of his supervisor unleashed consequences for the supervisor and exposed his incompetence and mismanagement. The cherry on top was throwing the supervisor under the bus, ensuring he faced repercussions for neglecting proper procedures. OP played perfectly. The next story is from Big Kappa 69. We are working too fast? Okay, we will slow down for you. I recently found this sub, and I think I have a great story for it. This happened about 2 years ago. I work in construction, but more specifically, I cut concrete. A lot of people aren't familiar with my job, but all you really need to know is that I don't pour any concrete. I use big diesel and hydraulic-powered saws to cut and remove it. I work at a relatively small company, 15 employees, and we are the company to use for concrete cutting and removal in our area. I was the first employee hired at this company, and my bosses are amazing. They have been in the industry for 25 and 30 years respectively. We will call them Brad and Cody. They know what they are doing, and they still get out and work in the field and will outwork any of our employees. We were awarded a no-bid contract at a very large facility to cut and remove a very large section of their outdoor slab because it had cracked. This was routine for us. We could do it in our sleep, but it was still a large project. The reason we were given the contract, but not held to a number, was because they wanted it done right and fast, and they knew that we were they guys to do this even though we aren't always the cheapest. The customer requested us to bring extra equipment and specialized saws just in case. Important later. The day comes that we are supposed to start, and they wanted us on site at 6:30 a.m. for a safety meeting. Brad and Cody went out while I stayed back to get my crews ready for the day before heading out to meet them. When I arrived at 8 a.m., they were still standing by their trucks just talking. I asked them how the safety meeting went, and they said that no one had shown up yet. Finally, they got there at around 9 a.m. and didn't even acknowledge that they were late. We met the guy that was in charge of the project. His name was John. John said during the safety meeting that there would always be a few people around from his company to watch us while we worked. We figured it was weird, but no big deal. We ran a routine safety meeting after, and it was time to work. We got about a third of the project completed in one day. The entire time we were working, there were no less than 25 people standing around watching us work. We kept joking with them to just set up bleachers. It would be easier to watch that way. They made us call it quits at 4 p.m. so they could go home. Right about this time, we started to figure there was something up with these guys. They didn't care that we didn't get started until late and wanted us to end early. Yet a big part of us being there was to get it done fast. Either way, we figured we would still be able to get done in about 3 days and make record time for a project of this size, all while making a fair amount of money for ourselves. The next morning, as we were getting ready to head out for the day, Brad received an email. It said, "While we can tell that X company are master operators with their machines, we feel as if they are operating in an unsafe manner by running multiple machines at once and request that they slow down to maintain safe working conditions. They also didn't try to make sure our supervisors felt that they were safe throughout the day." Brad was pissed. We were called in to get things done fast, and not once had we done a single thing that could be considered unsafe. When we got to the job that day for the safety meeting, Brad had changed from "screw these guys, they don't know anything about what we are doing," to "okay, we are too fast. We will slow it right down for them." At the safety meeting, John, same guy who sent us the email, looked at us and said, "Okay, everyone knows what we are doing. Let's get it done." He tried to end the safety meeting with that, but that's when my boss spoke up. He said, "Hold on. Since no one is man enough to tell us in person and just want to hide behind their emails, let's get this straight. We are too fast and unsafe for you." John became visibly uncomfortable and stammered out, "Well, there was a lot of people standing around and watching you yesterday, and I just felt that someone would get hurt if they decided to get closer to watch. I had set up safety cones with red danger tape strung between it and told no one to cross. We had taken proper safety precautions. If they didn't feel comfortable to have that many people watch, then don't have that many people standing, watching, and doing nothing." All Brad said was, "Okay, we will be real slow, and if someone crosses our line, we shut the site down for an hour for another safety meeting." Time for the malicious compliance, we started up for the day. Something to note about our saws, tractors, and other heavy equipment is that we have the ability to turn up the idle, or in other words, we can turn up or down the speed of the motors. So instead of everything moving normally and how it should, which is fast, everything is moving at turtle speed. Brad told us all that if we ever sped up our machines that he would kick us off the job, even Cody, his business partner. I was cutting with our saw while Cody was in the excavator to remove the pieces that I cut. Brad was in the skid steer to haul the pieces to the dump truck. I would cut the concrete into a 6x6 piece, which would normally take me about 20-30 minutes. It was taking upwards of 3 hours for one piece. After I would cut, Cody in the excavator would turn his machine on, slowly turn and stop. Extend his bucket. Stop. Lower the bucket. Stop. Tilt the bucket. Stop. Pick up the piece. Stop. Turn. Stop. Drop the piece. Stop. Shut off his machine. All without idling up. Then Brad would start his machine and repeat the same process to load into the dump truck. You get the point. It was painfully slow. After the first piece was ready to be pulled out and Cody started the process, John, who was just sitting on the sideline pale-faced, crossed my line to ask if we were really serious. At that point, Brad screamed, "Shut down!" and we all stepped away for an hour for a safety meeting. John crossed the line 3 times in the first day and 8 times total throughout the project. His employees never once crossed the danger line. Effectively, John was the only one he should have been worried about in his email about getting too close and being in danger. John kept saying, "No way you guys are being serious. What happened to what you were doing yesterday? You are so much more efficient." Brad just said, "I have in writing that you felt unsafe. So for the remainder of this project, we will be operating at a safe pace. It ended up taking us 3 weeks to finish at that horribly slow pace instead of 3 or 4 days at full speed. The best part? The head of the facility came out to see what was taking us so long. We showed him the email and he agreed with what we were doing. He told us he hates John and that he's insufferable to work around. He said that the success of this project is directly tied to John's yearly bonus. He asked how much we were charging them, and we told him that per piece of equipment and truck, and saw that is one the site is being billed to them by the hour, and that John had requested that we have nearly double the amount of equipment than we actually needed or used. The facility head just laughed and said, "Fantastic, I will make sure you are paid in full. Don't go easy on us with the bill." That's how we maliciously complied our way into charging about $200,000 for a job that should have realistically only been worth about $45,000. I even got a solid $20,000 bonus because Brad and Cody are fantastic bosses and knew we made a killing on that job. Update. I felt like I wanted to clarify a couple of things after reading the comments. First, yes, John tried to get us to go back to our previous working rate, but he would only ever verbally ask. My boss kept telling him, "I need that in writing and you have a deal. Hell might even save yourself some money while you're at it." But John either never understood what he was implying or really didn't want to send an email recanting his statement, believing he would look dumb for making a mistake. Second, this was a big project, bigger than what my part in it was. That being said, with how John was with us, I would seriously doubt every other aspect of the job went smooth for him. I bet they ended up with some profit, but not nearly as much as they would have without John, meaning he still probably got a bonus, just a very small one. Third, how did they have so many people able to stand around and watch for 3 weeks and not work? Well, by the end of the third week, there was probably only 10 people watching us by then. But this was a facility that has hundreds of people working there, so for 25 people at a time to sneak out for most of a day to watch us wasn't too big of a deal for them. They usually rotated, and if we saw someone one day, then we didn't usually see them again for about a week. Also, just another little satisfying part of the story I should have included was that Cody has had a saying since the very first time I worked with him. He says, "We aren't trying to retire off of this one single job. We are treating the customer fair, but fair isn't always cheap." After the facility head gave us the go-ahead to charge what was needed and not take it easy, Cody looked at us and said, "Yep, we are retiring off of this one." Obviously, it was more of a joke, but the satisfaction I got from hearing him say that, after knowing him for 10 years to be the guy who is extra fair, will never be rivaled. It was the perfect case of flawless, malicious compliance. By following the unreasonable demand to slow down, OP and his co-worker manipulated the situation to their advantage, derailing the project and costing the client $200K more than expecting. It is a lesson for people who pretend to be perfect and oversmart.